go ahead and get started with our presentation today. So we're just going to start off with a general overview of the CRNA program. So what it is, again, we're not going to dive too deep into this, but just generally the expectations that you can anticipate. So our CRNA program in total is going to be 124 credits. It is listed as being hybrid, as all of our DNP programs are, but for this program, you will have at least one in-person class every single semester. So you are going to need to relocate to the Buffalo area if you do not already live within a commutable distance to our campus to be able to come for those in-person expectations. This program is only offered at a full-time pace. We only start cohorts at one time per year, which is in the summer, and it is going to take 9 semesters or 3 full years to complete. So if you are starting in May, which is a summer semester, you're going to do summer, fall, spring, summer, fall, spring, summer, fall, spring, and you will finish up in spring. I'm sorry, you'll be starting in August. You'll be finishing up in May as part of that. You will also be doing over 2,000 clinical hours in a specialty area. Because everybody will need to be in the Western New York area, we are able to assign and guarantee your clinical spots. So you do not need to fight for clinical time. We are going to facilitate that entire process for all of our CRNA students. That's one great benefit to our program that we have. So we'll dive into the admissions requirements for the program here. And please note that these have been updated from previous years. So if you have applied to our program previously, or you maybe just have seen information that might have been from our summer 2026 cohort, these have been updated. So make sure that you take note of the new requirements. First, of course, is going to be a Bachelor of Science in Nursing degree. This needs to have come from an accredited institution. You do also need an active US RN license. And then our GPA requirements, and I want to note that we're going to get into much more detail about these next few bullet points. So the GPA, the letters of recommendation, personal statement, resume, we're going to dive a lot deeper into each of those pieces. So don't worry that we're just kind of glancing over them right now. But we are requiring a 3.0 minimum overall GPA and a 3.25 nursing GPA. And again, I'll get into what those mean and how we calculate those a little bit later on. This is our new requirement, at least 2 years of US-based ICU experience. And those 2 years must have been completed at the time of application submission and do not include any orientation or shadowing periods that you may have had. We do have a larger definition of what ICU experience means, what types of ICU experience we would accept as part of the program available on our website. So if you haven't already, be sure to check that out so you have an understanding of exactly what we mean when we say those 2 years of the ICU experience. We're also going to require 3 letters of recommendation, a personal statement, and a current resume or CV. And again, we'll dive into each of these pieces separately as we go through the presentation. So I want to start with the transcripts. Number 1 bullet point here, if you remember nothing else from this session, please remember this, which is that transcripts are required from every school you have attended. Even if it was one college level course that you did while you were a high school student, if it is going to be a credit that you have, we need to see that transcript. We're constantly getting transcripts that are notating other coursework that was done, and then we're not seeing any of those transcripts from those other schools. And so then that is slowing down the process because we're having to follow up with you, asking for all those additional transcripts. You're having to reach out to all of those schools. So prepare for this in advance. Get ready to request these transcripts and know that, again, they are going to be required from every school that you have attended. Now, there is some differentiation between which schools we are going to require official transcripts from, which means that they are sent directly from the issuing institution, versus institutions where we can accept unofficial transcripts, which would be ones that you can self-upload into the application. So we're going to require official transcripts from wherever you received your BSN, any institution where you received a graduate degree, and if applicable, any international institution. Unofficial transcripts can be used for any other school. So if you got an associate's degree from somewhere, or you had a second bachelor's degree, or you just took a few non-matriculated courses, those can all be unofficial transcripts. Now, unofficial does not mean messy, right? It doesn't mean a screenshot of a student portal that shows your grade. It doesn't mean a document that you pulled out of the bottom of your book bag from 15 years ago, right? An unofficial transcript should still appear as an official transcript. It just doesn't need to come directly from the issuing institution. So make sure if you are uploading unofficial transcripts that they have your name, that they have the name of the institution where it is from, and that they do have information about the degrees conferred and when they were conferred, if that is applicable to that particular institution, with your GPA, right? We still need to see the number of credits that you received, the credit points, and your overall GPA on those unofficial transcripts. Again, this can be the most tedious process of the application. So I would say the first thing that you should do after submitting your application is requesting those transcripts. Now, kind of the flip side of that, don't request them today because if they get sent to us and we don't have an application on file, they have nowhere to live, right? And they could end up getting lost. So again, this is something that you should do after you submit your application, but it should be the first thing that you do after you submit your application so that we can follow up with you if anything got weird, or if you're saying that the school's telling us that they sent it and we're not seeing it, we can follow up, right? If you wait until the last minute with this, there's a good chance that we're going to be missing something and that your application is not going to be considered. Now, to dive a little bit deeper into the GPA. So again, I mentioned before, our minimum overall GPA for the program is a 3.0, and our minimum nursing GPA, is a 3.25. So how do we calculate overall GPA? Overall GPA is going to be a combination of all of your undergraduate credits/quality points averaged between all of the schools you've attended within the past 10 years. The exception to that is going to be any nursing degrees, which are never going to expire. So if you got your BSN in 1996, we are still going to be factoring those grades into the overall GPA. But again, if you got a second bachelor's degree in a different field in 1996, we're not going to factor that into the overall GPA calculation. And again, this is undergraduate credit. So if you have graduate work, that's not being considered as part of the overall GPA. Now, your nursing GPA is going to be all of your nursing specific courses, plus some liberal arts courses that most nurses have completed if you have them, right? So examples of that would be anatomy and physiology 1 and 2, microbiology, chemistry, right? Those are going to be some of the courses that might be factored into that nursing GPA. Now, courses that are factored into the nursing GPA are never going to expire, right? So if you took microbiology as part of a program and it was 15 years ago, that's fine. We're still going to look at that microbiology credit and calculate it into your nursing GPA. So maybe the overall GPA from that institution isn't going to be part of your overall GPA, but that one course will still be part of your nursing GPA. Now, it's very important to note that none of our programs, and this includes our CRNA program, have any required prerequisite coursework, right? So there's no classes that you absolutely have to have taken in order to be considered. And we also really see no benefit because of that for students going back and taking undergraduate coursework while they're already practicing RNs, right? Sometimes students think that there might be some other electives, courses like sociology, pharmacology, physics. We find that having the experience in the profession, right, being hands-on, is going to be much more beneficial than going back and taking one physics course that's maybe going to only add a 1/10 of a point to your overall GPA. Now, that's not to say that you can't go back and take a course. If you just love learning, you're absolutely able to. But again, we really don't see a lot of benefit to students kind of going back and taking those courses if they're already very much full-time within their profession. Just going to reemphasize this again, right? And this slide is really just to kind of point out the difference between the minimum GPAs and what we're actually seeing with our admitted cohort. So again, while our minimums are 3.25 nursing and a 3.0 overall, for our summer 2026 cohort, the average overall accepted GPA was a 3.6, and the average accepted nursing GPA was a 3.78. I don't put these out there to scare you, but I do put them out there for a reality check in terms of the quality of the pool of students that we are reviewing, and what level of academics are typically going to be expected from our faculty as they are deciding who is ultimately going to be admitted to the program. GRE MAT requirements, we have none. So this slide is just to say that we have none of them. Please don't send us standardized test scores. We are not going to look at standardized test scores. They are not going to help you in any way on your application. You might be applying to other programs that require them, and that's fine. Send those scores to the other programs. Don't send them to us. We don't need them. We're not going to review them. It is not a part of our admissions process. The letters of recommendation, I mentioned we require 3 letters of recommendation as part of the application. If you submit more than 3, we are only going to read the first 3 that are submitted. So submitting more names is not going to help your application. And in many circumstances, it's actually just going to slow down the review process. So think critically about who are the 3 people that are going to provide you with the best letter of recommendation. Approach them in advance that you're going to be asking for this as part of your application, and just have those 3 as your recommenders. Now, in terms of who you're going to ask to submit these letters of recommendation, your recommenders should either hold a graduate degree or be a healthcare worker that you have worked with within the last 5 years. But beyond that, we really don't have any strict requirements. It does not need to be somebody that has a graduate degree in nursing. A lot of times we're seeing letters of recommendation from MDs, DOs, right, that you might be working with. Nurse managers sometimes don't have a graduate degree, but oftentimes they're excellent recommenders. We would really like you to focus on who is going to know you the best and be able to provide the most comprehensive insight into your ability to succeed in the program, into what you're contributing day to day in your current role, right, versus somebody that just has a really high title but isn't going to speak a lot to your actual abilities. Another important note here, which is the very last bullet point, due to a lot of the healthcare system firewalls, we would strongly recommend that you use a personal email address when you are listing your recommenders in the application rather than their professional one. So if you are able to ask their recommenders if that's okay and to be able to get their personal email address, things typically run a lot more smoothly, because otherwise the email that gets sent from UB could end up in a spam folder or it's not accessible. Again, there's many ways for you to contact us and let us know in the process, but the easier that we can make this for everybody, the better the process is going to be. So again, if you are able to get a personal email address, we would strongly recommend that you use that instead of a professional one when you're giving the contact information for your recommenders. The personal statement. All applicants are going to need to submit a 1,000-word essay, and it's going to need to answer 4 questions. These questions are available on our admissions page, and they're also linked in your student portal, which is a website that you're going to get access to after you submit your application. So the personal statement is not something that is submitted with the UB application, right, with just kind of the general graduate application that you're submitting. It's something that you're going to upload afterwards on the student portal. Please answer the questions all together. So it's not one essay per question. It's one essay that is addressing all 4 questions. Just a little tip as part of this, make sure that you are reading the questions prior to answering them. If you're just uploading the same personal statement for all your applications, that's a quick way to get your application denied, because it's going to be very evident to us that you really weren't putting in the time and the effort to ensure that you were addressing the specific questions that we have for our school and for our programs. Again, make sure that you're keeping everything together as one cohesive essay and that you're ensuring that you are answering all of the questions as part of your response. Your resume or CV is very vital to your application. So make sure that you are spending a decent amount of time on your resume and making sure that it is really a comprehensive overview of your experiences. You want to be really specific about your work background, right? So we don't want you to just list your experience as a critical care nurse, right? We want to know what floor did you work on? You might even get into how many beds were you responsible for? What level trauma unit were you on, or was the hospital that you were in, right? Really be as detailed as possible, especially if you are an applicant who is applying from outside of the Western New York area and you might be in a hospital or healthcare system that we are not familiar with. The more detail that you can give about what that experience was like and what you had to deal with on a day-to-day basis, the easier it's going to be for our faculty to be able to assess your experience as they are reviewing your application. Definitely make sure to include any shadowing, research, or leadership roles, right? Ultimately, this is a holistic review process. So we do also want to know things such as leadership, right? Places where you were able to step up, or your research interests that you may have beyond just the ICU critical care experience that is going to be a requirement as part of the application. Now, as much as we want you to be detailed, we also want you to be precise. So generally, your resume does not need to be more than 2 pages. If you are going on to a third page, make sure that it is covering more than half of that page. It's kind of a general rule of thumb for resumes, is that if you have like half a page or less, you condense it to the smaller number of pages. If you have more than half a page, you can move on to a third. But you really want to try to keep it to 2 pages. You also do not need to include any high school information on your resume, right? We don't need to know where you went to high school. We don't need to know what your GPA was in high school. That is not part of our consideration, is part of our admissions process. So we'll drill down now into applying, right? What are the dates? What does the timeline look like? What is the process? So we're going to start off with an application review period. So applications will be accepted starting on July 1st, 2026. And this is again for our summer 2027 cohort. If anybody's listening that's thinking of applying for a later cohort, these dates will likely change. So just note that these are for summer 2027. So again, July 1st is when the application is going to open. And all applications are going to need to be completed by August 14th, that's a Friday, 2026 at 11:59 p.m. Eastern time. So it is 1 minute before midnight UB time, right? Not any other time zone. Everything gets timestamped in our system. So we are going to know if you submitted it at 12:01 versus 11:59. All application materials need to be submitted by this deadline. This includes your letters of recommendation. This includes all of those transcripts that you're sending us from every institution that you have attended, right? Every year, we have applicants who don't apply early enough and end up being denied because they were missing just one document, right? One final letter of recommendation or one transcript from a school where they took one course. We tend to have about 20 students that fall into this category every year. Don't be one of those 20, right? Start this process early. Follow up with your recommenders and with the schools where you're requesting transcripts as needed. Make sure that we are getting everything by that deadline date. So starting on July 1st, you can fill out the application. You cannot start an application before that date, even just to fill in your basic demographic information. It's not going to work. It's going to end up being canceled out. So if you have gone in and started it, right, delete that application. It's not going to happen until July 1st. Sometimes this is a point of confusion. Be aware that the post-MS nurse anesthesia DNP is a completely different program. We inevitably have students who just see the words nurse anesthesia and they think that's the one, and they submit that application. The post-MS is for students who are already certified as nurse anesthetists with master's degrees and are looking to gain a DNP. This is not for students who are looking to enter a new specialty and join our CRNA program. So make sure that you are being aware of the program title, right? You're looking for just a general nurse anesthesia, nurse anesthetist, CRNA, right? Any of those buzzwords are going to be good. If you see post MS anywhere, that is not the program. Do not submit that application. Once you start the application, fill it out completely and submit it. You can save as you go along if you have to take a little break, but overall, we would advise just getting everything in and submitting it. Inform your recommenders that you're going to be requesting a letter before you submit it, because right when you submit the application, an email goes out to them that says that they can submit their letter of recommendation. They, of course, don't have to do it right that second, but just know that they're going to find out right when you submit that application. So if you haven't given them that advance warning, they might not know why this is happening. Do not wait for letters of recommendation to be sent in before you submit your application, right? Again, it just doesn't work well in terms of our processing, but it is also going to really slow down the process, and it's going to slow down our ability to be able to check your application, to send you email reminders about the different pieces in there. So submit the application, let the letters of recommendation come in as they are available and as your recommenders submit them. I mentioned this just briefly earlier. Once you submit your application, you're going to be emailed a link to, we call it the student status portal or the applicant status portal, the UB portal, right? This is where you're going to be able to pay your $75 application fee. And this is also where you're going to be able to submit any of those supporting documents. So the personal statement, the resume, unofficial transcripts, all of those are going to be uploaded onto the applicant status portal. So again, don't be confused or think that there's something wrong if you're going through and you're filling out the application and you're realizing there's no personal statement on here. That's because it's something that you upload later. Again, your application is complete when all documents have been received. We are not going to review it before everything is in place. So what does that review process look like once we've got a complete application? So once all of the documents have been received, myself and other members of our student services team are going to review each application to confirm that you meet our minimum eligibility requirements. So that's basically going to be that your GPA is falling in that 3.2 overall, 3.25 nursing range, and that you have those minimum 2-year of ICU experience. If you do not meet either the GPA or the ICU experience minimum, you will not be accepted into the program, and we will notify you at that time that we have determined that you are not eligible to continue forward. Students who meet the admission criteria, right? So again, just meet that minimum GPA, minimum ICU experience, are going to be sent for faculty review and are going to be reviewed by likely at least 2 faculty members. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, but you will be reviewed by a committee of faculty members within the nurse anesthesia program. We will not invite anyone for an interview until all applications have been reviewed, right? So even if you are applying on July 2nd and everything got done, you are not going to find out until after August 14th whether you have received an interview. And it will likely be longer than that because we need time to be able to review all of those applications. Once all of the applications have been reviewed, we're going to invite a total of 60 applicants for an interview. And students will be informed on whether they are granted an interview as soon as we possibly can. So again, once we've completed that review process for every single applicant, we've determined that cohort of 60, the 60 that were accepted for an interview are going to be informed and invited. The others who were not invited for an interview are going to receive a notification at that time. If you are granted an interview, you will be emailed. And again, we are going to email all applicants that are granted an interview at the same time. So some students aren't going to find out a week before others. Everybody's going to get this email at the same time. If you get that notification that you were selected for an interview, you are going to need to sign up for a date and time. And interview slots are on a first come, first served basis. So we will have multiple interview dates and multiple times that are available. But once a slot is full, a slot is full. And you're going to need to get something else. We will not call you to schedule interviews. So claiming that you didn't see our email inviting you for an interview is not going to be an excuse that we are going to accept as part of this process, right? We are not going to be able to accommodate you if we've completed all of our other interviews and all of our slots have been filled. All of the interviews are going to be in person, and the interviews are going to last anywhere from 1.5 to 3 hours and are going to cover a variety of topics regarding your experience, the CRNA profession, critical care knowledge, as well as your familiarity with the university at Buffalo. So it is an intensive process. And again, it is going to be a significant chunk of a day, and you are going to have to come to campus in person. So just be prepared for that as an expectation if you are selected for an interview. Admissions decisions, no decisions will go out before the interviews are completed. And decisions typically are released around Thanksgiving. So we will either accept, waitlist, or deny a student. And the size of the waitlist is going to depend on the interview pool and kind of the strength of the students who we interviewed. Accepted students are going to be given 10 business days to accept or decline their offer and to pay their tuition deposit. So again, really all of this is just kind of emphasizing the importance of constantly be checking your email, be looking for updates for us because this process does move quickly. And we do need students to really be communicating with us, following our instructions, and meeting our deadlines as we move through this application review process. So I want to give you a sense of what the cohort numbers looked like for our summer 2026 class. Again, this is not to scare you, but it is to give a reality check of what we are looking at in terms of the level of competitiveness for our program. So overall last year, we had 342 applications that were started and 261 applications that were submitted. Of those 261, 235 met the minimum requirements. Again, of that 235, only 60 were granted interviews. 24 students were accepted. That is our cohort size. So we will look to accept 24 students each year. 10 students were waitlisted and 166 were denied. So again, I'm not doing the math in my head, but it is a very low acceptance rate for our program if we look from that 235 that meet the minimum requirements to the 24, around 10%. Actually, I can do that math there. So again, very, very competitive, very, very highly selective program. So some common questions that we received, and I did see that some have been coming in the chat, and maybe some of those were your questions, and we can answer them here for you. But again, please feel free to keep submitting those. So what additional requirements do we have for international applicants? And unfortunately, international students, and yes, this does include our neighbors in Canada, are not eligible for our DNP programs. Our program is taught in a hybrid format, and because of the number of online classes, we don't meet, and you will not meet, the U.S. State Department requirements to be able to obtain an I-20 and be able to get an F1 that is needed to study here. If you are already here on a work visa, unfortunately, you are still not going to be eligible because our program is a full-time program. So you're not going to be able to maintain the requirements of the work visa and complete our program. Now, if you have a green card or permanent residency, you are considered a domestic applicant. You are no longer considered an international student. So you would be eligible to apply if you have either of those documents. What type of work experience do I need, right? We mentioned this earlier. Applicants need at least 2 full years of US-based ICU experience to be considered for our program. Those 2 years, that countdown is going to start after any orientation period that your ICU has. And those 2 years must be complete by the time of application, not by the time that you would start our program, not 2 days after the application is submitted, at the time that you submit your application. Now, just because we require a minimum of 2 full years, the average ICU experience for the incoming class was just under 4.8 years, right? So again, most of our accepted students are going to well surpass the minimums that we set as part of our application. Do I need my CCRN to apply? It is not a specific requirement, but it is highly recommended. Almost every applicant that is accepted to our program already has their CCRN. If you are working towards it, please make sure that you list this in your resume and that you give us the exact date that you are expected to complete it. So you can see here we put an example. You would just write a line that says CCRN in progress, expected completion January 2026 or January 2027 for the purposes of upcoming dates, right? So please make sure that you are notating that on the application if that is applicable to you. Do we require any shadowing experience? We do not require shadowing from our applicants. If you do have shadowing experience, again, please make sure that you add it to your resume. You can kind of create a new section, right? Shadowing experience, and then just list out who you shadowed, where you shadowed, how many hours you were doing it for, and what procedures you observed as part of that. I know some other programs have like a more specific form that you have to fill out. We do not have that. So really kind of the substitute for that is putting the information on your resume so that we are able to consider it as part of our review process. What if I already have my DNP or MSN? For students who are NPs or have other graduate degrees, it's not going to change the progression of the program. Again, it's still going to be 9 semesters, 3 full years in order to complete. Our cohort is going to move through everything at the exact same time. However, you will likely get some transfer credit to make some, not necessarily all of your semesters, a little bit lighter in the credits that are needed. What will happen if you do have graduate coursework is after you are accepted to our program, we would review any graduate courses that you had previously taken. We are not going to officially review any transcripts or transfer credit prior to a student being accepted to our program. Again, we just have too many students and our program is too highly selective for us to be able to do that for everybody that has an interest. So we are only going to do this for our accepted students. And again, graduate GPAs are not going to be considered as part of the admissions review. Graduate work is just for credit. It's not for the GPA. Can I take a non-matriculated course to make myself stand out as an applicant? You certainly can. It's likely not going to be at UB. Non-matriculated courses for us are going to be based on space availability. We currently do not foresee any upcoming non-matriculated opportunities. So if you're looking to take a course, it's not going to happen here. You're going to need to look elsewhere to be able to add that. And once you take it, you're going to send us that transcript because you're sending us a transcript from every institution that you have attended. Now, we just want to emphasize here, students, again, often think that taking a non-matriculated course is sort of the magic bullet for applying to CRNA school. There is no magic bullet. Again, with a very low acceptance rate, there isn't going to be one thing that's going to completely change your application. So while taking one of these courses is great, it's not going to guarantee your acceptance. Nothing is going to guarantee your acceptance, right? This is a highly selective process. So again, one piece is not the make or break part of the application as long as you're meeting those minimum requirements. So this is really a personal choice. We can't advise one way or the other. Our answer is going to be, it depends. It could help. It might not help, right? So again, this is really just for you to consider. If you want to take a course, you absolutely can. It is not going to be the thing that's going to really push your application over the edge. It's not the magic bullet as part of this. Can my transcripts be reviewed before I applied? We sort of answered this earlier. Unfortunately, no. Again, just due to the overwhelming demand that we have for this program, we are not going to be able to review any transcripts or calculate any GPAs prior to a student applying. So we're really not going to be able to advise in that respect. How important are letters of recommendation? Extremely important, right? This is sort of the one chance for a third party to be able to come in and tell us about you and really be able to add personality and perspective to your application, right? A transcript is one thing, but it doesn't tell us who you are as a person. Letters of recommendation do. Again, letters need to be submitted in a timely manner and really speak to your potential. And I mentioned this earlier as well as you're thinking about who should I choose? choose to write my letter of recommendation. Sometimes students think that if they're having, right, the big wig in the hospital system, sort of this leader, write the letter of recommendation, that they're going to stand out. That's really only true if they really know you and are really going to speak to your abilities and your potential. Getting a form letter of recommendation submitted is not going to do anything for your application. So again, really just be mindful of who you are asking to provide these letters of recommendation, and thinking about who is going to know me best, who is going to be able to speak the most to my positive qualities and what I'll be able to contribute to this program, not who is going to have the most impressive title at my particular organization. So again, just really be thoughtful about who you're asking, because these are such an important piece of the application. Does UB have grade forgiveness? And this is a term that we don't love because there seems to be some confusion around what grade forgiveness means, right? We can't forgive anything. Grade forgiveness is a process that would take place within the institution where you received the grades in question, right? So if your previous institution says if you take the course and you get one grade and then you take it again and you get a higher grade, that's going to replace it. Great, right? That was their policy. We can't implement a policy on another school. So that's where there seems to be a little bit of confusion. If you're asking the question, I've taken a class twice, which grade is going to count in my GPA? It depends, right? Again, it depends on when the course was taken. It depends on what the grades were in the courses. So there really is no uniform answer that we can give for this. But do know that we are going to try everything that we can to make you into the best applicant possible. So, we're going to try to select the highest grade from the time that you take it a course, but it is going to really depend on each student's individual circumstances. As I said, we can't really apply a blanket statement here because so much of it is dependent on the institutions where you've previously attended and on the circumstances for the class which you have taken. What are the most common reasons that students are denied? Number one, we don't have the space to accept everyone, right? If we go back to those numbers, we have 235 students that are meeting our minimum qualification and only 24 spots. We just simply cannot take everybody who is probably going to have the potential to succeed somewhere. Other reasons, you don't have enough ICU experience. You waited until the very last minute to submit your application and didn't give us the correct materials by the deadline. Students didn't submit a good personal statement or resume, or they had a poor interview, right? Sometimes students in the application on paper look phenomenal, and then they get into the interview and they crash and burn for whatever reason. So each piece is really going to be an important part of the application process. And again, there is, usually it's mostly just a factor of we don't have enough space to accept everyone. So it is tough to give an exact reason, right? And again, I think that it's just important to note that this is a highly, highly, highly selective program. And so every year there are going to be students who are qualified who we just simply don't have the space to accept. Now, with that, though, we will provide some tips for making your application the best that it can be. Number one, check your documents before you upload them. Don't upload photos or poor quality documents. Again, this really comes into play with those unofficial transcripts. You would be surprised every year how many we receive that they have water stains on them, or they've been crumpled up. We can't see a course name, or it's a weird formatted screenshot where all the sizes of the fonts and the grades are funky, right? This is a professional application, so everything needs to be as professional looking as possible. Number two, read the questions being asked before you write your personal statement. I already mentioned this, so I'm emphasizing it again. If you are writing personal statements for multiple programs, don't just copy and paste, because what we are looking for is going to be different than what another program is looking for. And we are going to be able to tell, again, that you really didn't put in the time and effort for making this specific to UB. So really be thoughtful, read the questions you're being asked before you write the personal statement. And then after you write the personal statement, go back and make sure that it's answering those questions before you submit. Now, our faculty are going to read all of your materials together. So as much as possible, make sure all of your documents are the same font and the same size, right? Think of this all as one document. So even though you are submitting the resume and uploading that separate from the personal statement, keep them consistent because when they all come in, it's one complete application package. And again, this is a professional application. We want it to look as professional as possible. And think of things beyond just non-matriculated coursework to show that you can do a DNP program. Get on a research project within your hospital system. Really talk about those leadership roles that you've had. Make sure your resume is showing you off. This is the one time that we really want you to toot your own horn, right? This is not the time to be shy, right? And not really show off those accomplishments. So make sure that you're putting everything on the resume possible to highlight all of your experiences and to show that you're going to be able to succeed in a really rigorous and fast-paced program. Just a few final thoughts here before we go ahead and open it up to Q&A. Again, there is no magic bullet when applying to CRNA school. I unfortunately don't have the answers to be able to say, yep, you do this and you're going to be able to get in. It doesn't exist out there, and it really doesn't exist for any program. We know that this process can be overwhelming. Please stop listening to those education influencers or other online resources that you're finding instead of listening to our office. I know there's a lot of people on TikTok now that are making the videos saying, this is what I did to be able to get into CRNA school. And if you do this, you're guaranteed to get in as well. That's not true. Please listen to us. We're the experts. We're the ones reviewing the application, right? So really try not to be leaning too much into those kind of online articles or the influencers that you may encounter. Again, we might not always give you the answer that you want to hear, but we are always going to give you the correct information as it applies to the University at Buffalo and to our program. Our job is to help students through this process. Our process is not the same as other schools, right? Each CRNA program is going to have their own requirements. So don't assume that just because one school does things one way, that we are going to do it that same way, right? Again, if you have questions, get in touch with us. We're going to give you the correct answers for our program. Number 4 probably should be number 1. Do not wait to apply. The earlier you get your application in, the more time that you have to be able to ensure that we have all of the correct materials, right? Again, inevitably what ends up happening is we have a student who applies at the very last minute. We realize that they didn't get one transcript sent from a school where they took 1 credit, and because it's already past the deadline, we can't accept that transcript when it comes in 2 days later. So really do not wait. Start this process early to make sure that you're going to be able to get everything done. And then finally, yes, the admissions process is competitive. The program is hard, right? It's a doctoral program. It's supposed to be hard. If it was easy, everyone would have it. So we understand that, right? It can be frustrating. It's competitive, but that is the nature of the program, right? It's kind of a reflection of the level of degree that you are receiving.